is for sure.
Thank you so much for joining us today for the LMSD ISC's April Roundtable. And a sincere thank you to our guests, LMSD Lead Technology Specialist, if you could give a little wave to say who's who, Jen Goldberg, Elementary Tech Specialist for K through 4, Kim Phillips, Middle School.
I'm not.
And I messed up your.
So it's okay. I just want to make sure people are aware.
Okay. Okay. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Okay.
I'm sorry, I have your program things back.
Hi, I'm Jen Goldberg. I am the Elementary Technology Specialist supporting all 6 elementary schools.
Okay. My name is Kim Phillips, and I'm our instructional technology coach at our schools.
I'm Laura Hutelmyer, and I support the high schools.
Great, thank you. In shifting this program to a more cooperative and interactive form of communication, we ask that everyone here, both in the room and those joining us through Zoom, to treat our guests with the utmost respect and appreciation for being here. This meeting, as with all of our roundtable meetings, will occur in the spirit of cooperation, open communication, and mutual respect. In order to enable our participants to equitably ask questions, we ask that when you're called upon to ask a question, you only ask one at a time, and you can always ask a second question after others have had a turn to ask their first. In addition, we'll be allowing those on Zoom to ask questions throughout the meeting, and their participation will be coordinated by our Vice President of Communications. Before we get started, we want to invite you to join us for our next parent education program, Helping Kids Navigate Differences Through Dialogue, with our guest, Dr. David Kruger, who's the Executive Director at the Dialogue Institute. And this will take place on Monday, April 27th at 7 p.m. This is a virtual program only, and pre-registration is required to receive the Zoom link. And registration will stay open during the program, so if you join late, that's not a problem. The ISC Parent Ed Series, it's a monthly webinar series open to all LMSD parents and guardians who are interested in learning about trending topics from industry experts. Today's roundtable will be closed captioned, recorded, and posted, along with other past programs of our Parent Ed and Roundtable, all found on our YouTube page. And please make sure to also follow us on Instagram and Facebook. So welcome, and thank you so much for being here today.
Our first question, Jen, what does technology look like in a typical K-4 classroom in our elementary schools?
This is a great question, and the challenge in responding is that it varies significantly, both from kindergarten to 4th grade, of course, and from teacher to teacher. And it varies from day to day. So it's not like teacher A uses more tech than teacher B. It just depends on the day and what they're doing, that teachers use different things during different parts of the day. The way we look at technology at the elementary levels, it generally falls in one of 3 buckets. We have creative use of technology. So students are using it to publish their writing. They're using it. Yesterday, I worked with some 2nd graders who were working on their PBL project for science. They studied extreme weather, and they're making a video to illustrate what they've learned about their weather system. So we use it as a creative tool to express what they've learned. Students also use Seesaw a lot to share what they know. They can talk, they can draw, they can take a photo of something. So there's a lot of modalities for students, especially for young kids who don't always have the ability to type everything out. So there's a lot of modalities for creative expression. We use it for practice of skills. So we use tools like Raz Kids or Epics, allow students to listen to stories that they otherwise might not be able to read. They might be at a higher reading level. They can understand and comprehend, but couldn't read the words necessarily. We use Dreambox to practice math skills. We use Study Island for ELA concepts. And the 3rd bucket that we use would be research and information skills. So students use our library resources like PebbleGo, WorldBook, Britannica, Culturegrams, BookFlix. They use all of those different tools to gather information, to research, to learn, to begin that process, that fundamental skill of understanding research and how to take in information. We also use some curricular materials like for social studies, we use Studies Weekly. For science, we use Generation Genius as well. It varies day to day. Some students may not use a computer at all today. because they're in a guided reading group with their teacher and they're doing independent work. And so they may not touch a computer at all today. They may use it tomorrow for research. They may use it the next day to listen to a story on Rouse Kids. So it varies, but it's generally in small pockets and always directed by the teacher. It's never, they just grab their computer when they have a chance. It's always directed by a teacher. We also use technology for accommodation. So for students that have the ability to listen to a book, using voice to text for students who struggle with physical writing skills, they can type their responses or have their responses read back to them. We can enlarge fonts. Chromebooks have a ton of accessibility features, as do iPads. So we rely on those as well. Students do occasionally type their materials, but they generally do it as a form of publishing after they've already handwritten their information. I think that pretty much sums up. That's a lot of information, but it's really hard to give you a general synopsis because it's so varied from day to day.
Thank you. This one's for Kim. How does technology use change as students move from elementary into middle school, and what new challenges tend to emerge at this age?
Absolutely. So we definitely build off of the skills that Jen just spoke about, those foundational skills, and then add on to really focus on those 4 C's: communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and creativity. Some of the really specific changes in elementary school, they use Google Classroom. When they come to middle school, they start using Schoology as their learning management system. So to help students, all 5th grade students get an intro to Schoology lesson, because now they're looking at multiple courses and being able to manage that. They also are able to email their teachers and peers starting in 5th grade. So teachers give a mini lesson about how to write a proper email, how to have like the subject line, making sure they sign their name, dear, whatever teacher they're addressing. We also have the ability in middle school for students to look at Power School, specifically starting in 6th grade, to look at their missing assignments, to see what their grades are. And one of the things that we encourage during our intervention and enrichment period is for students to look at those, see, are there missing assignments? Is there a teacher that I feel like I need to work with? And we're trying to build those self-advocacy skills for them to look and find some time to get support. Students are also using Schoology and Google Workspace to manage deadlines and files across different classes. So that's really challenging for our young students. So one of the things that we use tech is trying to help them with those executive functioning skills. So I'll work with teachers or students to give them tools that can be both digital or paired with paper planners to help them. So some different examples I've worked with students is color coding their files in Google Drive, or using a tool called Google Keep. You've used it before. It's one of my favorite tools. It's a digital sticky note that you can use and check off as you complete it. Since students use Google Workspace for many things, it can be on the right side of their screen and can just be another tool to really assist them. We also see more communication in digital platforms. So having the students collaborate with peers, giving peers peer edits on papers. We're also seeing higher level of creation. So one of the tools that we use is Canva, and that's where students have a design space where they're able to really show their learning beyond just a multiple choice test. Maybe they're intentionally designing an infographic, a historic timeline. And one of the things that we're trying to teach there is a term called visual hierarchy. What's the most important thing that my audience needs to know? That's what I'm making largest in my design. What's going to capture the audience attention? These are skills that will carry them through as they get into higher ed. The other things we'll see is multimedia projects, producing podcasts, as we're pretending we're on a podcast today, and editing videos. I just did a lesson with students of book trailers to be able to analyze a character's development. And students being able to be those creators, those writing out the scenes, thinking about it. The excitement is real, and being able to share with their peers gets them excited about books that maybe they haven't yet read. In computer science, you'll see some really high level skills going on. Students are designing web page. They're prototyping apps in middle school, which is really cool, and they're programming robots. Now, in terms of research, I used to be an elementary teacher before moving into this role. A lot of times in elementary, you're just looking up a few facts. Whereas when you're in middle school, you're going to multiple sites. You're finding information, you're laterally reading between them and trying to find what's the best sources to include and why. So kind of bumping it up to that next level. So as students are getting those higher level concepts, some of them might need more support, and that's where accessibility becomes really important. I work with our teachers and also students to learn what tools we have that are built in to support their learning. So built into the Chromebook or their MacBooks in 8th grade, tools that can help them with speech to text, text to speech, enlarging their screen. Some students have a really hard time with moving their cursor around. I've showed them there's a little red circle they can put around their cursor so they can actually find if they want to like track what they're reading. So being able to know that those features are there, and again, self-empower them, that they are able to turn them on when they need them. Challenges, and this is a challenge I think adults have too. The biggest one I say is tab switching, which is you have the tab, you're supposed to work on, but then you have your email, you have you have a project in your other class you're thinking about. So I actually did a lesson with students all about task switching and that media balance. We had the students fold a piece of paper in half, and they had to first write the first letter of the alphabet A, and then at the bottom, write the first word in happy birthday, happy. Then B, their birth, B, and the birthday. And they had to keep going back and forth, and I timed them to see how long it took. And then they were able to just write out the entire alphabet all in one, and then the entire happy birthday song. And they were significantly surprised how much time it saved being able to focus on one task and then the other. But distractions are there, and that's something that is an emerging challenge. And then the other one is really in that digital collaboration space. Just like in a physical classroom, when you group students together, we all do it. Did you see the flyers last night? And that can happen as well in a digital workspace. And the same thing that we do in the classroom of monitoring students and intervening as needed, the same thing happens in that digital space as well.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Laura, what does effective technology use look like in high school classroom today, and how is it preparing students for college and careers in an AI-driven world?
Effective technology use at the high school level, I think of all the levels, they all tried first tying to a learning standard. Like, what is the objective of the lesson, and does the technology support or enhance what we're trying to accomplish? So that would be, I think, the top part of like what effective use looks like, and then very intentional planning in terms of your instructional design. So like when we talk about lesson planning, we're not just talking about here's my standard, here's my opener, my middle, my closer, but like, am I using technology and where and why? And is, trying to find the balance of that throughout the lesson. I think when we start thinking about effective, that keyword effective, there's 3 questions that come to mind. Who's doing the thinking? Is the student doing the thinking and using the technology, or is it are they just consuming something? And so a lot of times, our teachers at the high school level teach very high level content that can be very hard for students to understand the first time. And sometimes those online simulations that they can, they're high quality simulations that students can then visualize and see something like the inner workings of a cell, or physics and the atom, like things that are really hard, or even like large scale, like zooming in and zooming out on really high level concepts. I think that's an area where I see technology supporting learning. Does it matter outside the classroom? So like, are we just doing this for the sake of learning the learning target, or is this like a skill that's going to transfer into the real world? Because we know like our high school teachers, they always have that on the mind, that we're preparing these students at 12th grade to graduate and go do something, whether that's more school or the workforce. And that can look like a variety of different things. Kim did a great job of summarizing a lot of those examples. A lot of those carry into the high school, like using Canva. They do podcasting as well. I think that medium, especially in videos, we talk, a lot of our world is like speaking and listening now. And so bringing that medium into the classroom, I think, has allowed for teachers to like make that connection for kids. So videos, portfolio work is also very important at the high school level. So I see a lot of digital portfolios. And then research papers also. And a lot of our students who go on to higher level education are going to have to do some sort of high level research and use a university library at some point. And so understanding how to find high quality peer reviewed work, being able to cite that, understanding like what it means to be peer reviewed or reliable source, all of those things are part of like effective technology use. And then our students making decisions, because now we're starting to transition away from like as much teacher directed, and there's still teacher directed use of technology, but like giving students more choices and more options in what how they're going to, learn or show their learning. And one example that comes to mind, I worked with a teacher last year who did a Padlet activity where students could create interactive maps. And so they did this collaboratively on the same Padlet assignment, and they did it on the civil rights. So they did a civil rights tour across the country, and they chose the spots on the tour. They had to explain why they chose those spots. So there was some research that went into that. They had to work with their partners. They had to create the Padlet. And at the very end, they had to add a new location for the tour and like explain why are you adding this new location? And one of the students used like one of the built-in AI features to actually create an image of the monument that they would want to put at this location, like a prototype of it. And so like we're starting, that wasn't something that was teacher directed. That student like saw an opportunity and like used the tool that way. So those are, I think, effective uses of technology. And did you ask about the preparing students part too on the
Yes.
okay.
Yeah. Sorry.
We have done a lot of looking at the future of jobs report 2025. I don't know if this room is familiar with it, but it comes from the World Economics Forum, and they do a very comprehensive report. Two of the things that we looked at the most were the core skills of 2025, and then the top 10 fastest growing skills from the workforce. And so when you look at those skills, like that's kind of what we're looking at and thinking about when we're planning professional development for our teachers and trying to, think about which tools could help students to grow in these areas. So like the core skills, it's really like, they have really nice infographics. You can see like creative thinking is up there. So like, teachers really, I think it helps them to make connections from what they're asking of their students in the classroom to the real world. And so we found this to be really helpful in just wrapping our brains around it. AI and big data, surprise, is the top 10 fastest growing skill by 2030. But then number 4 is creative thinking. And so like trying to find that balance of how do you do that well in a classroom? And that takes like really well-crafted instructional design.
Back to Jen. Are elementary students exposed to AI tools like ChatGPT? And if so, in what way? And what are the benefits and risks of introducing AI at an early age?
That's a great question. Obviously AI is a big hot topic. And for elementary, it's a pretty simple answer. The answer is no, students are not exposed directly to AI tools at the elementary level. They are exposed to the concept of AI in 3rd and 4th grade. They do have specific lessons. They take place during their STEM class. So they're taught by STEM educators. So it's not homeroom teachers who may have a different level of understanding of it. They're taught by the STEM teachers. The lessons that they have in 3rd grade is centered around centered around a picture book. And so it's focused on a picture book, and they kind of have a conversation about it. It's more of a how robots aren't perfect kind of lesson. It ties into AI as well. And then in 4th grade, they use AI for Oceans, which is a lesson put together by code.org. And that basically teaches how AI gets data. It goes through bias, and it teaches students about how to synthesize when you get information from AI. They don't actually directly use AI except through that model through code.org. Teachers do use AI perhaps for teachery tasks, but as far as the question asked about students do not have direct access to AI at the elementary level.
Okay, Kim, how are middle school students currently using AI tools like ChatGPT, both appropriately and really?
So I would be remiss to start without talking about any tools to talk about the AI literacy that we've done ahead of time. So starting in 2024, all of our students in middle school received a lesson about what is AI, how is AI trained, what is how to check for accuracy and bias in AI. Following up that same year, we saw a lot of stories about concerning relationships with children and chatbots, which then we followed up with a lesson about who's behind the screen. We wanted to protect students and understand not only their privacy, but that AI is a program, it's not a friend. Starting in 2025, we had our AI policy introduced. So at the start of this school year, every single middle school student had a lesson about this is our AI policy. This is how teachers will communicate to you when and how you can use AI in their classroom. We gave them real world scenarios that they were able to interact with, a little check-in quiz to make sure that they understood. And that's how we started our school year. One of the things that we did to kind of help take this and really make it visual for our students in the last lesson that I did with them is using something called the C framework. And what it stands for is using AI safe, using it to E for ethical and E for effective. So just so they can see a short acronym, this was in the last lesson that I did with all the middle school students, of having a framework that we point to when we're using AI, we need to make sure we're being careful of our privacy and our data, not over relying, checking for bias, and making sure we're really still using our own critical thinking. There are not many tools that are approved for student use in middle school. We have a really rigorous vetting process that we use for any tool that we would use with students. There are two that I'm going to highlight. One that we have is called School AI. It's a vetted and secure program. About only a few of our teachers are really starting to explore it, but it's a tool that's not open like a ChatGPT. It's a closed walled garden. So a teacher can set a really narrow parameter. So for example, I had an 8th grade teacher use this. They were doing a reconstruction research paper. Students were struggling coming up with a thesis statement. She set up a school AI space that where students were able to hop in for an opening of a lesson about 5 to 10 minutes to be able to explore and get some help refining their thesis statement before they came out of the tool and started to use it. Another tool that's approved that's part of our Google Workspace is a tool called Notebook LM. This is something that we've started educating our students about, and this is for study support. So either a teacher can put in their study guide or a student could put in their study guide, and they can actually have flashcards generated to help them study. They also can use it to generate a podcast overview, a 10-question checking quiz to help them and see what areas they might need to hop out of the tool and focus on more. It helps them kind of look at the content in multiple modalities. Obviously, this is a really challenging time for students to be a learner while having so many tools at their disposal. And one of the things that it's important while they're still young and in middle school is really treating any AI misuse as a learning opportunity and really asking some why questions as educators. Why did a student use an AI tool to maybe complete their homework assignment or to use it for their project? Did they need more time? Were they overwhelmed? Were the directions not clear? And where is more human intervention needed to help support them? And we'll continue as we have in our digital citizenship lessons, really supporting students building that AI literacy through that C framework.
Right. Continuing on the AI theme, moving on to high school. How are students currently using AI tools like ChatGPT for schoolwork, and where do you draw the line between acceptable use and academic dishonesty?
So to also just frame a little bit, because we had the new policy, a lot of the same things have happened at the middle school and the high school. So we've had that introduction to AI, what is AI, in 2024 as well. This year, we have 3 digital citizenship lessons, all pretty much around AI. The first one was in, I believe it was like October, on the new policy and giving students hard scenarios, like, you use it for brainstorming for this assignment. Is that acceptable use or not, and why? And that is a good, yeah, right? And that's a really good one. It depends. did you ask your teacher for permission? And so we gave them some of those informational things up front, and then they had to make sense of it with these specific scenarios to help them, you know, be able to navigate this when they're by themselves, right? So I think that was like a key lesson we did this year. Just like Kim mentioned about Notebook LM, we had a January lesson right ahead of like the midterm, mid-year value, or not mid-year, mid-year experience, and shared, you know, about cognitive offloading and the dangers of that, and how do we use AI tools to support our learning, because that's what we found. Notebook LM is one of those tools that is a great supporter. It doesn't, you're not just asking it to like write an essay for you. And so all of those built-in review study tools we felt were appropriate ones to help them. And then the last lesson we have actually next week coming up, verifying online information for like misinformation, and how do you navigate that. And we're presenting like the SIFT method and lateral reading in that lesson. But to go to your question, like how are students actually using it? We surveyed all of the high school students in the fall, like November, December, and we had 1,600 responses, which is a 57% response rate. 10% of students report never using it. So 90% are reporting using AI in some capacity. You know, and this is all self-reported. So we don't actually like monitor, you know, ChatGPT use because we don't provide them that. But most common tools, ChatGPT at 88%, and then Gemini at 33%. And then when we asked the question, what were their reasons for using AI? Self-reporting, they're saying the highest one was explaining difficult concepts. So just, you know, kind of what I shared earlier, that at the high school level, they're learning some really high level concepts, and sometimes having access to, you know, be able to ask questions when they're not in the presence of their teacher all the time can be helpful. Brainstorming ideas, 61%, that was the next one. And then followed by summarizing complex texts, editing and proofreading, drafting or generating text for non-graded personal use, and then coding and debugging was the last one. In terms of where we draw the line for acceptable use and academic dishonesty, I mean, we have our academic integrity policy, which has not changed at all through all of this. But what we do have since the advent of AI is our AI syllabus statement at the high school level. And so this is something that exists in the syllabus at the high schools, and AI acceptable use can differ by teacher and even down to by assignment. And so that's where like the intentional planning around like what are we using and why, that's where I think it becomes really important as instructional designers to decide that for our lessons. So yeah, that's in a nutshell, I think that like what I can say about that. From our role, like we do a lot of, we support our teachers, right? So we're trying to help them navigate this because it's really hard, especially if you're a teacher that has any kind of writing assignments in your classrooms. So we've offered like pop-up PDs for teachers, and we've met, you know, for various coaching interactions and meetings with teachers when a question pops up or they need guidance, they're not sure how to navigate something. The things that we advocate are clear expectations up front for students. Are they allowed to use it? Yes or no? And if it's a yes, like how? Being really specific and not just, you know, green light, whatever. So unless that is like the goal of an assignment for students to be innovative, but really being clear upfront. Focusing on process over product, that has become, I think, a theme among many school districts, not just grading that end final submitted paper, but really looking at the process of writing and how are we assessing students throughout that process, which our teachers are spending a lot of time thinking about and doing. And then incorporating personal reflection. So giving students a chance to actually reflect on like the decisions they're making through the learning process and why, because to be honest, that's one of probably the more important parts of the learning process is like, how is this changing my thinking? And so giving students a chance to justify that. And then also rethinking certain assignments. So starting to look at our assessments and asking ourselves, does this, you know, hold up in 2026? Is this something I still want to be, you know, asking of students, or is there something I could be doing differently so that, you know, it feels more authentic or real world? So those are all of, you know, a lot of things happening at once. We do use Turnitin and their AI detection, to use as a red flag. And that's something that we've been like really clear with, that, when teachers are collecting written assignments, that if something comes, as a high percentage of potential AI use, like they're very aware of the false positives that can occur in this. And so really just treating it as a red flag and a conversation starter with the student. Hey, this number came up higher than I would have expected it to. What do you think? And there's been plenty of situations where we've had false positives and the teacher and the student resolve it together. And I guess the final thing I would say is, Google version history is also a tool that we use to be able to, for the teacher to see the edits that a child's making in the Google Doc, so that they can start to decipher the decisions they're making in their work, their workflow.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Jen,
Sorry.
you want to go?
Oh, no,
You want to do this? One of these or?
Sure.
Okay. Like those might be. Jen, how would classroom instruction and participation look different if students were not given one-on-one devices until after elementary school?
It is a great question, and I think about this a lot. Students, I think the biggest thing is students would have fewer options for sharing their learning. We use digital tools, and we talked about already the variety of modalities that students can use to express themselves. When looking at primary students, they don't always have the handwriting skills to match their cognitive thoughts. They don't always have the language that they want, but maybe they can take a picture or draw a picture, maybe they can act it out. And so using devices like an iPad gives us an ability to really capture in a lot of different ways. It also allows for teacher feedback. So when we use something like Seesaw, students can capture what they know by taking a picture of their work. Maybe they've built something and they've taken a picture of it, or maybe they've drawn something and they've taken a picture of it, or they've just used the camera and spoken to what they've done and what they've learned. And then the teacher in Seesaw can give them comments on it and ask them for clarification, have them try it again. It's a communication tool, believe it or not. It doesn't seem like it might be, but teachers at the primary levels can use it as a communications tool. That would be challenging to replicate without a digital tool. The teacher would need to carve out that time, because oftentimes students are working on their Seesaw activity while the teacher's doing something else, working with other individual students or groups. So it's used also to provide different levels for students. So meeting students where they are. Students are reading at level B today, and they move up to level C tomorrow. The iPad can follow along with them, or their Brad's Kids level can follow along with them. But it's very easy for teachers to manage that when they have digital tools available, so that it can follow the student's level and really hit where they are. Some of the other things, particularly, and when I saw this question, I wasn't sure if it meant like I'm not using a computer, but my peers are. And so obviously there's the standing out from peers concept. And that can be challenging at elementary level when everybody else is using a computer and I'm using paper and pencil. It can be seen as a punishment, or it can be seen as something else. The other, I think, big challenge of not having a device would be accessibility tools. I think there's so many tools that kids can use, whether or not they have a specific 504, whether they have a specific documented medical condition, they can use these tools at any time when it helps them do what they need to do. So if they need to have something read to them, they can have something read to them. In particular, we use it a lot with researching. We have first graders using Pebble Go to do their research on animals. They couldn't otherwise read the text, but they can listen to it from Pebble Go, and then they can take facts down and do all those things. So having the ability to have those accessibility tools, just having them on hand and not having to find other ways to meet that need is a significant advantage. The other piece is we do often use devices for whole class participation. So everybody has an iPad. We have apps that have a whiteboard, and students can write their response and hold it up. Sure, we could actually use whiteboards, and we do that. It's not that we don't, but sometimes that is time consuming to get the marker, get the sock to erase it, and I don't have the right color marker, and my marker's dried out, or I can't find my sock, and all of those things. So we do often use the iPad. We also have apps that have digital letters, so we can build words, and we have unlimited letters. I don't have to worry about not having enough A's to build this word. I have all of the letters and they're just unlimited. So I can build and rebuild and restructure my words and make words, hold them up, make a new word, shuffle them up. I can do those type of things, manipulatives that otherwise would be clunky. We could do them, we could replicate them. They would take more time. We would need more materials. It might derail the flow of the lesson. So we do a lot of whole class lessons with iPads, particularly in kindergarten, first grade. So those kinds of things would be a little bit more difficult to do without having a device until middle school.
For Kim, kind of comboing two questions here, but how are teachers adapting assignments in response to the increasing use of AI tools? And how do you get the students to question what they see online or get from AI to, I know you talked a little bit about looking at that information critically, but how do you work with them?
Sure. So the first thing I'll share is, if you heard Laura's lesson or answer from the question before, as we're having this age of AI, this is such a big task that we work with our teachers on. So a lot of my answer is going to mirror Laura's, which is amazing. And it's amazing because our teachers are being trained by both of us in this age of AI about how to think about this increasing response. Our students then are seeing that same response at middle school and high school. So it's a really streamlined experience. So the same strategy that Laura talked about is the biggest shift is moving from that final product to the process. So we're thinking about looking at the brainstorming, the outline, the drafting more heavily than just that final end product. We're seeing teachers looking at assessments and thinking about, can I convert this essay into a live discussion? Can this multiple choice test be turned onto a hands-on project? We also have lockdown browsers in Schoology and in our data platform called Link It. And what's helpful about that is it ensures that students are only on that testing screen that they're on. They can't go to another tab. It locks them in until they complete that assessment. We're finding that other products that we use are starting to add that as a feature. And as those come up, we're working with them to be able to add that into our classrooms and test it to make sure that when we are doing any sort of assessment, that it's really making sure that the integrity of the results are valid. As Laura also shared, the personal reflection, having that add-on of at the end of an assignment, students having that initial thought process, explaining why they got to that conclusion, which really has that higher order thinking and makes them own their work. And all of the things that we shared about that are part of PDs that we do for teachers. We also have an AI cohort where teachers voluntarily sign up to even learn more and dig into these topics because we know that they're so essential. When we're talking about how we were teaching students to question what they see and get online or AI, we work with teachers and students with digital citizenship lessons. And one of those is we did a digital media lesson. Some of the things we talked about is the strategy called lateral reading. So when you see something online, or if you see something from AI, being able to check it across multiple sources to verify the accuracy of it. The second thing we talked about is click restraint. This is really hard for a middle school student. So if you ever are on Google and you just search whatever you're trying to research, most students, I would say 90% of them click on the very first thing that they see. Instead of going through and just looking at the list and seeing what looks like the most trusted source that I could go to. That's really hard. We're conditioned to want to go for that first click. So that's something that's part of the lesson. We also talk about, as students are in middle school, they're starting to see more social media posts as well, and thinking about and identifying red flags in any post that you see. From talking to my 8th grade students, that's what they say is really hard. You're online now and you're seeing something real, and I'm sure I sometimes do that. So is this post really real? And one of the things we talk about is that red flag is looking at something. Is that really eliciting a strong emotional response or a reaction from me? Let me pause. I noticed that. Now I need to go and do some lateral reading to figure out, is this actually true? And then on top of that is that AI specific skepticism. So that who's behind the screen? We had scenarios in that lesson of thinking about AI sounding and designing to be a friend. And you want to trust a friend, right? But that is built there. There's no feelings. It can hallucinate and make things up, and making sure that kids are really aware of that and keeping humans in the loop. And that's part of that C framework. They're always verifying that output against trusted sources and then going back again to that strategy of lateral. Okay.
Yes.
Laura, we're gonna combine a couple of questions and kind of touch a little bit on that information. How are assignments and evaluations changing in response to AI's capabilities? Like, for example, a return to Blue Books. And then how are you preparing the students to evaluate AI generated information for accuracy within those assignments and biases?
So a variety of changes are happening. And a lot of them I think we've already kind of touched upon. It's very similar to what Kim just shared. We have seen an increase in in-class handwriting, in some classrooms. And this is like, teachers are handling and navigating it the best, to their abilities in the tools and the knowledge that we have at this time. So some, really do need to practice writing skills, and it's as simple as that. And I've, seen an increase in in-class writing. I've also seen an increase in the use of our lockdown browser in Schoology, just to get like a first draft, like of your initial thoughts down. And then like the teacher can remove the lockdown browser and you can copy and paste that into your Google Doc and start, getting in there, working and editing. We've also seen, a shift in some people's practice and assessment design, like I mentioned earlier. And one specific example that comes to mind is, there's a business teacher that was working on their final exam for their semester course, and they give a big writing report in January and it's a group report, and they just felt like the quality of the work was different since the advent of AI. And so we were talking about, how do we navigate this and make this like a meaningful experience for kids? And so she did this took a lot of planning and a lot of time, but she redesigned her whole assessment and it's still collaborative, but it's now more task oriented and authentic. So the students know what the task is coming into the time allotted, and they bring all of their materials and research, and then they have that time to put together whatever the task is, the challenge. And so they're just trying to come up with, different ways for kids to express what they know. And that was not just like a one-off. Like, this teacher structured her entire year to prepare these students for this mid-year experience. She had chunked like the different skills that you would need to build. I believe it was like building a business. And so you have to have your marketing campaign and your finances in order. And so she taught these like, units that all came to this like culminating experience for students. And that's like, top tier instructional design. So, we're seeing that, but that's a huge lift, so that takes time to work through. We have teachers that work in PLC, so they're also collaborating on this work together in small groups. So we're seeing a variety. And your other question was, how are we helping students navigate? Yeah. I think this is one where we're starting with, like I said, the navigating misinformation lesson through advisory. These are ones that, the whole school gets exposed to. So it's one way that we can ensure that, every student has had an opportunity to learn this. And so the lesson has SIFT, which is like stop, investigate the source, find other resources, and then trace the claims back to the original thing or claim, and lateral reading, which Kim said. And like the key here is like, these terms may not be sticky, but it's really get off the tab you're on. Just open another tab and do another quick search to make sure that what you're seeing is accurate. The tricky part though with AI is, and I think there's like a lot of research like that's emerging, and it's just experience. No one is an expert in AI. And the real best way to actually learn how to use it is to use it in an area where you are the expert. You have a good foundational knowledge of your area, so you can judge the outputs. You're able to say, oh, this doesn't look right to me. And that's tricky when students aren't really experts in all of these different content areas. And so I think what that looks like at the high school level, and this is where we're kind of working into right now, is like, how do we have more like subject specific experiences that incorporate and integrate AI into the learning, that allow for students to be able to discern whether something is accurate or not. So, you know, that's, I think, an ongoing thing that it's huge. It's going to be hard to do, but it's work that's what we're leaning into right now.
Thank you. This is, I'm going to just throw it out, anyone can answer this one. I know throughout the whole conversation, you guys have talked about various ways in which the technology has been able to help support students in terms of the text to speak, the speak to text, and accessibility, and that's all great. I'm wondering where else, if you can elaborate, how the other ways it's used to support students with 504s and IEPs beyond a few things that you've mentioned already.
Is that AI related, you say?
No, not AI related,
Okay,
just
no,
technology, AI together. Yeah.
I'll take that.
Oh,
Coaches, and I checked in, we get this question, I thought Kimberly Fraser a whole lot. All the trainings, one of the things that the three of them do, Jen, Kimberly, and Laura do, are they support teachers and students with technology concerns, among a lot of other things, including instructional coaching. But one of the things that we work with is the teachers that are case managers and supporting students as regular ed teachers in their class. They're privy to the same trainings and the same skill building that they do. So as you know, IEPs, 504s are very individual and specific. A lot of times they're team related decisions on what specific, and sometimes there's a assistive technology person that joins IEP meetings that helps, depending on what disability is, to help support that individual child. So with technology, including AI, which I think is one of the questions also, they have the same opportunity to get a lot of the same trainings. And a lot of it's really individualized to the student. And with the team decision on, does this make sense to support their learning, help access their education? So that's how it is with that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
Jen, how do teachers balance screen time with hands-on social and play-based learning at the elementary level?
This is one of my favorite questions because an elementary teacher does this all day, every day. They balance everything. They have 20 some odd children who have 20 some odd learning experiences coming into it, especially with our younger students. And so everything they do is balance. Everything they do is to try to hit everybody where they are and move them forward, but yet expose them to other things. So teachers spend most of their day trying to figure out how to get everything balanced. We in kindergarten, first grade, kids don't sit still for more than about 10 to 15 minutes, period. So they're not going to do any activity for more than that amount of time. And so the teachers are always, oh, they've been sitting for a while. I'm going to have them, stand up and move around. And now we're going to take them to their desk. And now they're going to be writing. And now they're going to be listening. And teachers do that just by nature of being an elementary school teacher. To me, technology is just one of their tools in their toolbox. It doesn't really change their decision making. They decide, what does the student need? What does my class need? What does this group need in this situation? This situation might call for technology. This situation may not call for technology. They really do try to balance everything they do. Kindergarten has a wonderful purposeful play program. And I've been privy to seeing a lot of it in the last 2 years. And it's really fabulous. Kids really do engage in this purposeful play time every day. And there isn't technology components to it necessarily. They're running a pizza shop one day and, they're building things and they're creating. And I saw Play-Doh last week. And so they're doing all the things, but teachers balance everything all the time. The other thing about the balance and social piece is that devices can be used in a collaborative manner. So students can, with use of Google products, work together on a project. They can peer edit their writing materials. They can make a Google slide where I make one slide, you make the next slide. Those kinds of things. They can use Padlet and other tools to share ideas. So there's a collaborative nature of technology as well. And like I said, we also do use iPads oftentimes as whole class responses. So that's also, you know, a little bit with the participation. But teachers ask themselves every time they're giving a lesson, what's going to help my students the best? And if it's paper and pencil, if it's an iPad, if it's, you know, whatever it is that they can come up with, that's what they're going to do. And they're just going to use a variety of different tools throughout the day to make sure they're meeting all the students' needs where they are.
Jen, staying with you for a minute, what digital skills do you identify as the most important for kids to have by the time that they are in fourth grade?
That's another good question. So one of the things that we like fourth graders to be able to do, moving into middle school, and Kim and I have talked about this. Kim and I talk a lot about the transition because a lot of the questions I get are, well, what do they need to know to get to middle school? So, you know, backwards mapping, how do we make sure that they're getting those skills? And so one of the things I like students to know when they leave my elementary schools is I want them to be able to visually represent themselves or their knowledge through technology. I want them to use that as a tool to share creatively. Can I make a Google slide? It doesn't have to be a Google slide, but can I do something visually using technology to share my information? Maybe it's Seesaw, maybe it's Canva, maybe it's Padlet. It's something that I can use creatively in a digital way to share what I've learned. We do spend a lot of time about internet safety, and I can get into that now, but I know you probably have another question about it. So I wasn't going to get into all the details, but we do spend a lot of time about internet safety skills. So I definitely want students to know those basic fundamental skills, critical thinking, and those kind of things. So we talk a lot about that. I want students to know basic technical skills. I want them to know how to use a mouse. I want them to know how to use a trackpad. You'd be surprised how hard it is for a second grader who's used an iPad for 2 years to learn how to use the 2 fingers. And if you haven't seen this, please come back in September. I will invite you to any second grade classroom you want to come to, but watching second graders try to use a trackpad when they have to click and drag and they have to use one finger still and one finger moving, and you do it all the time and you don't think about it, but that's a physical skill that second graders often struggle with. And sometimes I physically show them how they glue their one finger down. Sometimes they even use 2 fingers. They glue one down and they move the other. They need to know how to use a trackpad, and that's actually something we teach them, typically second grade, because that's transition year. I also want them to know how to use a basic keyboard. How do I capitalize a letter? Where do I find a semicolon? Where's that exclamation mark? Those kind of things. I want them to know how to use technology to support their learning. So when can I use a spell check? And believe it or not, I have first graders who are using the predictive text on their iPad because it allows them to write words they wouldn't otherwise be able to write. When they're trying to write a story and they want to say, my friends and I, had a snowball fight, and they don't know how to spell 3/4 of those words, but predictive text puts them up there for them. They can get the words down on paper just to get their ideas out. Then we can talk about flushing it out. Then we can add details. Then we can put punctuation and capitalization. But just to get their ideas out, predictive text is actually a tool that they use. So we want to encourage them to know how and when to use it. It doesn't always apply, but it does definitely apply in a lot of situations. We also want them to know how they use the accessibility features, which we've talked about. We also believe that technology gives students experiences that they otherwise wouldn't have at the elementary level. So creating videos. I do have some students making podcasts. I have students who took a creative writing piece, a persuasive essay they wrote in 4th grade, and then they made a video to share with their teacher to try to convince their teacher that they needed to purchase whatever they were asking them to buy. And so something like that, students might not otherwise be making videos at home or have the ability to do that. And so we provide that for them. We also want them to have basic typing skills. They need to know where all the letters are. We talked a little bit about that. And just understanding the digital resources that we have. We are so fortunate here in Lower Merion to have so many digital resources available to us with all the library tools that we have. We can check out books online and have access to books that maybe the copy in the library is already checked out, but I can read it directly on my computer. And so having all those resources, having World Book and Britannica and all those tools available to us when we need them, just knowing what's there and when and how we would want to use those tools.
This is for you. What does responsible technology use look like at middle school level?
Absolutely. So one of the first things about responsible technology use is just following school guidelines and also having that Chromebook being with them, being able to take physical care of it as well. We talk about digital footprint and how as they start to have an online presence, how they want to have that positive presence online, being aware of cyberbullying, alerting of any online harm. We talk about healthy habits, balance. We also talk about digital media literacy, as we discussed before, strategies to help students, as well as being aware of their privacy and safety online. The last thing we talk about is self-regulation. As students come in, one of the little mini lessons we try to focus in on is they come in and a lot of them have like 100 tabs open. And we try to encourage them to start the day fresh. Let's exit out all of those tabs. And some of us could be guilty of that too.
I do that.
I'm not looking around the room,
Didn't
but
get
you
that
exit out all of those tabs. And we actually have a tool called ClassLink. I don't know if you've seen it before, but it's where students' apps and like their passwords can be held. And one of the lessons I do with the 5th graders when they come in is we talk about what are their most used applications. And we have something called auto launch that can just open up those specific tabs. So we talk about what's the best workflow to start your day. Well, we're going to restart our computer, make sure all of our tabs are empty. We open up ClassLink and just have what we need on our screen to help us so we don't have that tab distraction. And that's something that we really want to build in that self-regulation skills as we go through middle school to really help them that when they're in high school, as the topics get more complex, as Laura shared, that they have that tools in their toolbox to help them.
Thank you. Laura, what you talked about, you referenced the jobs report, and what kind of leads into this question, what skills are becoming more important because of AI?
I think it's a balance of two. One is like more technical, like being able to have the technical skills to be able to use tools like AI, balanced with your human skills, you know, like being an empathetic person, being a good listener, being able to communicate and work with a team and problem solve. You know, I think that's the balance that we're all trying to strike with students, and how do we grow and cultivate that. Kim mentioned the 4 C's earlier. That is something that existed pre-AI and it's held tried and true. The idea that students for today's world need to be critical thinkers, collaborators, communicators, and creative. And so those 4 C's have, I think, driven a lot of like the design work when we're thinking about what we're asking of our students. Kim also mentioned information literacy, which is a huge one. We all know, you know, how much fake online content there is with AI and just like social media in general. And so like, how do you know if something's real or not? Metacognition is also something that a lot of our teachers practice. And that's the act of like, how do I know what I know? And like, that's becoming more important because when you have this issue of offloading your thinking to AI and like, you know, how do you make sure that you are in charge of your thinking and that you're calling the shots, you're making the decisions? So instilling that and helping students practice building their metacognition, I think that's like an explicit skill that I'm seeing taught more since AI has come to be, and then just AI literacy. So I mean, students still do need to know how to prompt. I see a lot of students use AI just like they use Google, and they'll put in like a quick little search question, and we all, you know, anyone who's prompted before knows you're not going to get as good of a result if you don't add some more detail to it. Practical uses of AI. So we talk a lot about like the dangers of AI, but trying to give them examples of how you can use it to support your work. And that's something that I feel like is still so like, there's a lot of innovation to unlock there. People are still figuring this out. So yeah.
Great, thank you. This is another one for anyone who wants to answer, but if you could change one misconception that parents have about technology in schools, what would it be?
I'll start with that. I mean, I think we all probably have some thoughts on that, but I'm going to start with that because I do think there are a lot of misconceptions at the elementary level. I think the biggest misconception that I see is I want people to realize that we are aware of the movement that's out there. I read the books, I listen to the podcasts, I read the articles, I've read The Anxious Generation, I've read Digital Distraction, I have a very highlighted copy of it. I read and take in all this information, and I try to balance that in what we do here. And so I think that balance between building community and building community and relationships within our classroom, but also infusing technology and innovation in the school experience is key. And so we really do try to do that. We take in everything. We're not in a bubble where we ignore everything that we hear out there, because it's valid, but we also try to take in and prepare our students. The world of tech outside of school has not decreased. In fact, it's increased. And when our students go to Wawa and they want to order their shorty, they have to use a device in order to do it. And when they are at McDonald's or at Panera, everything is devices. And so we want our students to feel comfortable. We want our students to feel prepared. So we factor all of those things into the instructional day. The other thing I would mention that at the elementary level specifically is that everybody having a device provides digital equity inside of our classroom. So everybody has the same device, everybody has access to the same resources and materials, whereas we don't know what happens outside of the classroom. They may or may not have access to all of the tools that we are able to provide. We also use technology to support whole class participation and collaboration, which we talked about. And the other thing that I think is important for elementary is that our devices are filtered. YouTube is not allowed on our devices at all at the elementary level. The only way students can access a YouTube video is if a teacher specifically posts a video for students through Google Classroom or through Google Slides. And so kids aren't freely watching videos. They're not using it, as a game system. And if they are, like, on their iPads for, Fun Friday or something, and they're playing games, they're learning games. There are no games. There's no Angry Birds. There's no Minecraft. There's no game that isn't some educational purpose. Every app is put on there intentionally, and it's put on to support the curriculum. We work based on what do the students need to learn, and then how does the technology support it, not the opposite, where we take a game and how do we make this fit into our curriculum? We work with what do the students need to know, and then how can we use the device to support it? So everything that we have, even if the students are using it, for something, everything there is educational. There's nothing on an iPad, and students can install apps and teachers can install apps. Everything is filtered and vetted so that we make sure that we have high quality educational apps available to the students.
Did either of you want to add anything else, or you don't have to?
Yeah,
She covered it.
I don't know if this is a misconception, but I just want to highlight, I think our teachers are incredible. And I think when it comes to technology and education, it takes a lot of time to design instruction. I feel like I keep saying design, but that's truly what it comes down to, is they are instructional designers. And I'm seeing more than ever, with AI, teachers are making the choice to not integrate AI at times. And that's a real intentional choice. And it's to preserve whatever learning goals they have. And so that's something that everyone's trying to navigate. And it's an interesting time to be a teacher with AI. So
Yes. Understatement.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So last question, and this is kind of to any of you, is how does the technology department work with the curriculum department to consider how much technology is incorporated into curriculums?
Scott,
Maybe
you want to take this one?
The question was, how does the tech department work with the curriculum department to consider how much tech is incorporated in curriculum decisions?
Sure. Our tech people who you're talking to, they meet with us periodically and go over things. And the question specifically is, how do they talk to do what?
Just how do they work together?
Sometimes meetings, sometimes asking questions in different ways, back and forth on the support, navigating. We've been trying to be intentional about one of the things that has happened is COVID has expanded things out of necessity. So a lot of the people, to take you back, and I don't love doing this because we tried to move past and not reference it as much, but that was a really interesting time, and I was really proud of the district and the three of them. We were way less impacted than other places because we were able to pivot really quickly with talented people and some resources. And one of the things I've said publicly at some point was that we needed to have more digital tools to deliver instruction completely virtually. Like, I don't think it could be underscored how much of a shift it was going from brick and mortar solely to changing the learning platform fully. And a lot of us lived through that, and as professionals, and worked tirelessly to make that as seamless as possible in, you know, the craziest shift we've all experienced together. As we came off of that shift, we're at the process now, we've been the last couple of years of what did we use that was out of necessity to create an optimal learning experience different than the one we had before. So you want to talk about a learning curve, like throwing someone in water, you had to survive, and that's what a system did. And so as we're coming back to a more traditional experience, what we've done over the last few years and are continuing to do is, what did we rely on a little bit more and go a little bit too far with tech out of necessity, and now how do we bring that back? And I think we're doing a decent job at that. We've removed a bunch of tech tools. So I would think the number one thing is that coordination between our instructional technology coaches and our curriculum team is navigating that. Where is it used? Where is it overused? And that audit isn't like a simple thing. It's something we've been navigating where people have become dependent on that, built that into their instructional design. And now how do we intentionally take that out? We have in some cases. We're in the process of doing it in others. But that's a collaborative effort. We meet, our curriculum team meets weekly, periodically. They join academic council. They will sometimes join and work with not only our curriculum team, but our building instructional leaders. So there's lots of different collaborations, but that's a tangible example I thought was worthy of talking about. Is something we all kind of experienced. I don't know if you're listening online or here what your school age children were that line at that time, but that was a thing for sure that we're still kind of navigating. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you all so much. We're going to open it up to questions, both in the room and online. Is there anyone in the room first that has any questions? You guys were so thorough there. Okay, Sarah. Yes, one.
I imagine this is an interesting time being in this position because there are a lot of really cool tools out there that can be incorporated, but then you also have this hordes of evidence about the negative impact of screen time on kids. How are you balancing those two things? And if you could be as specific as possible, so not just we are balancing, but exactly how are you balancing those two things with limiting screen time as much as possible because of the negative impact, with having access to some of these tools that can be cool and helpful with technology.
So I can start with that, and you guys can jump in. But one of the things specifically that we've done, we've been clear that teachers don't use devices during indoor recess time. If you recall, this winter we had like 75 days where the snow wouldn't melt, and so kids had a lot of indoor recess time, which normally they'd be at least getting outside. Kids are not allowed to use screens during indoor recess time. Even if their screen is educational, they're still not allowed to use it for those things. It's not used as a babysitter at the elementary level. It's used intentionally. Students are given specific times when they're to use it. Elementary is pretty easy because there's one teacher in the room, and so they know what their students are doing at all times. Their devices generally live in a cart, and then when they need it, they pull it out, then they go back into the cart when they're not using it. So it's a little bit easier to manage at that level. But just having some specific guidelines for teachers of when students can and can't use it for sort of free time. That's been something that we've changed this year to help sort of balance that out for teachers.
Thank you.
Susan, you want to unmute yourself?
Sorry, can I ask the middle school person to answer the same question?
Sure, yeah. One other thing that we've talked about that we really would like to continue to move forward with our teachers is thinking about devices during like those early finisher times. A lot of times when students finish, we want to be more, give more options that can be either low screen or no screen to help. I know we have digital tools that students are able to use to continue to practice, but as you shared, the research and what we have that's out there, being able to offer those times. if we are using a digital tool, making sure it's really focused and specific on the amount of time that, for example, IXL had a curriculum supervisor sharing with teachers. This is the allotted time we think is recommended for using IXL to ensure that we're not going over those thresholds.
Thank you.
Yep.
Somebody's on line. Susan.
Susan?
Susan, if you want to unmute yourself, you can ask the question.
Hi, thank you so much for this roundtable. It's so interesting
you're still
to
on.
hear all the
Hold
different.
on, hold on.
moment. Let me get ready for that.
We need to change the volume on our end out
It's a
here.
lot of high tech stuff for us. We could have
Right, you guys
yeah.
advise us. Do you have the tech people to help you with this?
Yes, probably. Okay, how about now?
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Can I go? Okay. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for having this roundtable on AI. It is really interesting and there's a lot going on for adults as well with figuring it out. A couple thoughts I had because my son is autistic and he's already struggling with tech and the limits of it and understanding it and getting lost in it when he has an assignment and staying on task. It also conflicts a lot with his social skill needs, like being able to look at another peer, working, in that real time realm. So I was also curious. I think Sarah had a question that the actual time limit for as a balance. Because I know when my son does the tipping point, it's like, oh no, he's had too much screen time, and there's no. I mean, he comes back. We have a chart at home and we track it, but there's no tracking at school, like how much screen time he has. But that was one of my thoughts that I wanted to ask about, and also I think the word clunky came up, which I thought was a really interesting word to use for process for handwriting. Because I think it is kind of getting more clunky because we're dependent on more digital and keyboards. But also, I think clunky is an important part of processing knowledge. And I wouldn't want to take that away completely for the sake of having a smoother um, writing process, because the clunkiness is the thing that you're kind of creating there. That's that friction you need to learn a thought or to know what you're thinking or even to rethink rather than having these words fed to you on the screen. I know I get aggravated by that, but I'm also like, oh yeah, that is a better word. So I see where the balance. I just wanted to put that out there, that there is a real importance to that clunky feeling of struggling with a thought and getting to know your own thinking. So my son, just to wrap it up, my son was doing slides and having a lot of trouble getting lost in it just felt like, how is he going to organize the slides? We did it on paper first, and he was prolific, much more prolific than he could if he was doing it directly to screen. So hand, pencil, paper was definitely a very grounding and an important thing for him. So just wanted to see if you had any thoughts about the clunky process and also the actual time, like real tangible time cutoffs for tech and screen time during the day, like a diet. Thank you.
There were a lot of thoughts. I just didn't know what you like. If you
So I'll jump in with
Okay.
at the policy meeting, the superintendent talked, and one of the themes I think that came up in both questions so far was how much time, be specific. So we are understanding there's a need for, or a request for what that is. In the November meeting that our three tech coaches talked about. Hi, Sarah, is it?
Susan.
Susan, I'm sorry. Hi, Susan. Oh, I see. Hello to both of you as one stream of vision. The superintendent talked about that, and that is something we're working on. Is our filtering system getting that answer of how long people are online. I will say, I found a great disconnect between what is being portrayed in in the energy around technology, which we understand. I love that Jen said, and we all have, we're following that. Is why we presented in November. These are meetings. We're going to meet in this room with all principals on Wednesday. We're going to continue to talk about it, not as a reaction, but something we've been talking about all year long. I referenced that question before with COVID of where we were. And I worry about pendulum swings of going too far and completely cutting that out. We've heard some things that I hope you value in the answers that what will be supportive. So balance is the right word. It was the name of our presentation in November of balanced digital learning culture. And so some things that would support that in a transparent way that we know people want, which is what is that balance and how often are they on there? So we do follow guidelines that are out there. We're constantly looking at what the latest guidelines are. We're trying to strike that right balance. And let's acknowledge from the starting point that even saying that word balance, you'll have a variance of continuum of what that should be, including when professional guidelines are out there. So at some point, you have to make decisions as a district of what you think is best. To individualize that is really challenging in a system. And I know people are asking for, let me have it my way exactly. And one of the things that's really one of the most stressful jobs in America right now is being a teacher. And there's no shortage of things of why that's the answer. But one of the things we want to really protect against is creating 17 different lesson designs in the same room. So I want to be transparent of, we do want to protect that experience, and we don't think anybody wins from that. So balance becomes the operative word. And we know we need a little more transparency for that. And that would include, what does that look like? In the times that we've done that, in the ways that we've known how to, we're looking at doing that more simply through technology and finding that answer. We weren't super alarmed. We do think there's a big gap. And I understand this gap. I'm not even saying this critically of when you're not there and you hear things, our mind goes to the worst scenario. So oftentimes I'm hearing people get to a microphone and portraying that kids are going to the school and they're mindlessly staring at a screen all day, not talking to their peers or to the instructor, their teacher, who in most cases they love throughout the day. That is not what we're seeing. When I walk through elementary rooms, we see the iPads in carts and we see kids hand-on playing, laughing with their peers and their teachers. So if you hear anecdotally or from your own child that that's not their experience, certainly call us. That's not what we're designing. Call us. There's effective lines of communication. First is that teacher. My kid came home and said he was on the screen today for 4 hours. If that's the case, we'd like to do something about that. We're not finding that in our experience. I don't say that doubting people that came to the microphone from what they heard. I say that to say I walk around buildings every day. Our instructional coaches are in classrooms throughout the day. The disconnect between what's being reported and what's lived seems pretty vast. Again, not to start controversy. If that is your experience, tell us so we can deal with that. But again, getting back to balance, we're looking into tools to give you better answers for that. And we are not waiting for reaction and live microphones. This is something we're concerned about. When it's said that we care about this, softly it's implied, and sometimes more directly it's implied that we don't. And I'm here to look you right in the monitor and say, that's not true. Like, this is what we do for a living. And we want to do that well. And one of Laura's first talking points, she said, was it starts with the learning goal. And what is the learning goal? And what you said about your child and the clunkiness, we agree with. We want people to go through that productive struggle. Part of that learning process isn't clicking a button and having answers like that. And when that's done, we have to do that better. It was also mentioned by our panel that AI is a challenge that we've all, like on November 30th, 2022, when chat went public to a high level and reached 1 million users in 10 days, that caught us all off guard. So one of the hardest professions got infinitely harder. We recognize that people have devices at home and are able to do that. So we're figuring that out in real time. Again, to make a COVID reference, like we figured out COVID in real time. And people want answers and guidelines quicker than we can create them. And that creates this tension that we're in that is an uncomfortable one sometimes that we're working diligently to try to figure out. It was a really long-winded answer that I covered way more than you asked, but I hope
I also
I'm listening. So I'm also trying to answer other questions that are predictable at this point.
I hear that and I'm listening. I think I'm trying to understand if we're getting closer to like, 1 hour a day is reasonable. 2 hours a day is reasonable. What is reasonable for a child whose brain is still developing to be on screen time? Because I don't know that. I didn't grow up with screens. Like, it's a different world. So I don't know all the science that's coming through. I know some of it. My kid's not on the screen like 6 hours a day or even 2 hours a day. But I think we need to kind of find a number to hang our hats on or move around, because it feels really vague. One teacher could be doing something, other teacher's doing something.
Susan,
Say this, the good news is it's not for Susan, Sarah, and Scott to figure out and put a timestamp on right now. There is guidance that we follow. We follow different organizations that share that guidance. Well, we try to look at multiple ones because there's always questions about the reputation and credibility of some. Those who take money, nonprofits, aware of all of those issues, as it sounds like you are as well.
You share
So-
what that guidance is.
Yeah, I won't be able to quote all of them, but American Pediatric Association just re-released more guidance that just came out very recently, within 2 weeks or even a week. News cycles go so quickly, it might even have been 2 days ago, but like it was very recent. And so they're developmentally different, as you would imagine, from that 18 months and under, no screens, a certain month. Like I don't want to get into quoting because I don't know them exactly. So
Scott's
I'm
not
just,
a pediatrician.
What's that?
I said, you're not a pediatrician, you don't have to know all these. Okay, Laura has numbers. Okay,
Laura,
can you?
if you want to turn them, I've been talking way too long. If you want to turn that back.
Yeah. And then Susan, we need to move on because I know there's another question, but if you want to share what you have on that,
This was, and the only reason we.
Thank you, Scott.
This
Yeah.
was brought up, I think, at the last time we were here, one of the parents had quoted the AAP guidelines, and so they just re-released. And it seems like the shift is really away from all screen time is bad, active versus passive screen time, which was something that we not only shared in the fall, but we actually taught this in a lesson in the fall of 2024. So this was like something that has been on our radar. They don't give, the only clear guidelines, like in terms of minutes, are really for children that are 5 and under. And then when it comes to school age and teens, they talk more about the importance of sleep, like hours of sleep that a child's getting, 60 minutes of physical activity required daily, and then recreational screen time capped at 2 hours. So that's, I think, speaks to the active versus passive screen time use in our classrooms. That, we don't plan passive screen time use in our class.
Thank you, Laura.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
I wanted to comment on something that Laura said about business teacher and the work with assessment. And I was very impressed with that actually, because I really think we need to be looking at the process that's going on, not just the final product. As the process has evolved and developed from what it was 5 years ago or 10 years ago, that's where we need to be looking to see, are the sources valid? Are they reasonable? What are the steps that the student has to go through in order to get to that final product? And I'm wondering how that works into assessment of in any discipline, of the products that are presented by the student. And I was impressed with what you said in the examples you were giving from the business department.
So your question is, how is that happening in other
Yes.
classrooms? It truly depends right now. I think our teachers, trying to think of what the year was that Scott just quoted, but our teachers are also learning how to use AI tools at the same time. And so this was a teacher who was utilizing AI to help her redesign actually the assignment, the assessment, and that takes real serious time. So that was also a collaboration between her and I too. So time to schedule with coaches or, your supervisors, curriculum leaders. So that is really truly dependent on the teacher, the PLC, and their curriculum work that they're doing. But professional learning community. Yeah, it's when you have a cohort of teachers that all teach the same class. And so they collaborate on assessment, design, grading, planning. But I think that the key that Scott actually put the name to it was productive struggle, that a lot of I think we're starting to see teachers really lean into the productive struggle of learning and embracing it and helping students embrace it. I think we as teachers understand that you have to struggle to learn, and that doesn't always feel good to a student having something to be really hard. And all of us know when you've taken a hard class and you get through it, you feel great, you know, it's an accomplishment. And so helping students get to that point, I think there's a lot of scaffolding that we like teachers have had to intentionally design into their lessons to help students get through these like struggles, these learning struggles that they just have to go through. There's still assessments that are traditional assessments. So, you know, I think it depends on the curriculum, the course goals, because some students are preparing to take like AP IB exams. So there's definitely, I think, a variety. Like when you look at the mid-year experience week for a student, they might be taking some traditional assessments. They might have some like more project-based collaborative experiences. It just kind of depends on the class.
I want to add though, Laura does such an amazing job at this. We've shared about how amazing our teachers are. And when a teacher does something like that amazing business project, we had an opportunity to actually spotlight that teacher so other teachers could hear that example. And obviously they might, you know, they don't teach the same course, but the spark is there. They might have that conversation with that teacher. And that's really how that small change starts to ripple when we bring up the teacher leaders that we have.
Thanks for that perspective too.
Yeah.
And Cicely, you have a question online. Do you want to unmute yourself?
Hi, it's more of a positive comment. I just wanted to just really thank all of you. I can see the ladies there in front of me, and I know Scott's off to the side because this is a really hot topic for our district. And your presentation really made me think about some things that I had been thinking about but didn't connect. You know, like technology, equity in the classroom. I think that's really important. Metacognition, just thinking about what we're thinking about. And there is an opportunity for students to flex their creativity muscles, you know, using AI, right? If you put something in and the output is not what you want, then you've got to tweak your input. So I think there's some really opportunities, you know, for students to use it creatively. And I really like what you had to say about the productive struggle. I kind of call it like consciously incompetent, right? Like I know that there's stuff that I don't know, and that's not comfortable. And it's also not comfortable if you're a teacher and you're tasked with teaching students and you know that there's stuff that you don't know. And I would think you're kind of like, please don't ask this question because I'm not really sure where I'm going to go with it. So I just really wanted to say thank you for all the hard work that you guys are doing. And there, you know, there are a lot of intangible benefits to that productive struggle, you know, resilience and grit and really, you know, giving students kind of like an ego boost if they productively struggle through a problem and get to the solution. So it was less of a question and more of a comment and just a thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Cicely. Okay, so we're going to wrap up today. I can't thank you all enough. And Scott, thank you for being here as well and jumping in. You guys are doing so many great things. And we really appreciate it. We appreciate you taking the time to be here with us today and share with parents what's going on. Thanks so much.
Yeah, great to see you guys. Please sit together too. It feels like it's a little more.
Yeah, run together. I still remember telling you last time about coming up. I like thought